When I tell you that this is my third time attempting to film my January wrap-up, I'm not kidding. Hey book lovers, I'm Elise. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of January. But before we do that, I need to switch up the format that I do my wrap-ups, because while I love watching people sit and go through their books one by one that they read, talk about the summary, the characters, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, I love watching that stuff. It's not in me to do that. The last couple months, my reading wrap-ups have been going out a lot later than they should have, and I think it's because I just cannot bring myself to sit here and talk about books that I read weeks ago. It's kind of turned into a bit of a vicious cycle, and I'm really wanting to do something a little bit different. So if you have any ideas of fun ways to do reading wrap-ups, please let me know down in the comments below. For today, I think I'll tell you all the books that I read, I'll tell you what I rated them, but I'm not going to tell you what every single one of them is about. In January, I read 11 books total, and I'm happy to report that my number one read genre was sci-fi. I read 3 sci-fi novels. The other genres, they actually all tied. I had 2 horror, 2 historical fiction, 2 mystery thriller, and 2 nonfiction. I had 2 3-star books, the first of which was The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. This was an e-arc that I got off of NetGalley. Overall thoughts on this one, I was intrigued enough to keep reading the story. There's 2 parallels from present day and then also the 1970s, all at the same Italian villa. I definitely wanted to keep reading because I wanted to know what happened. But some things that I didn't really like about it, it wasn't super thrillery. It is deemed a mystery thriller, but it wasn't very thrillery. I didn't really notice any major twists. I didn't really care for the ending. The choices that were made seemed a little out of left field. And the other 3-star book that I read this month was How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I'm not going to go into any detail at all about this one because I do actually have a designated reading vlog where I read only that book, and you can find all of my grossed out faces and many opinions, some spoilery and some not. I do have specifically marked spoiler sections so that if you don't want the story spoiled for you, you can skip over that part. But I will link that video down below, so be sure to check that out. I had 3 3.5-star reads. The first one is Nerd Adventures in Fandom from This Universe to the Multiverse by Maya Phillips. And this was a nonfiction read. It turned out to be a lot more memoir than I had expected. I thought that this was going to be a look at different fandoms from across the decades. I mean, Lord knows we have so many fandoms, some that I didn't even really know about. So that's kind of what I went into this book expecting, was that it would be all these different fandoms, how they relate, how they differ, how they affect society, how they affect people growing up who, you know, had a certain fandom that affected them in their childhood. Like for me personally, I'm a millennial. The Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings fandoms, they had a lot to do with who I am as a person now, just because of how they affected me in those younger years. I believe the author was also a millennial, so she had a lot of things to say about her childhood that I really related to. So like a lot of the 90s cartoons that would play all the time on like Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network. So that was kind of a fun little blast from the past, getting to hear about those things that I've not even thought about for I couldn't tell you how long. There, of course, were some fandoms that I don't relate to at all. There's a pretty big section on anime fandoms, and I personally have never gotten into anime. I don't really know anything about anime. There was an argument in there at one point about, you know, she made friends with somebody who didn't really get the hype of fandoms, and she thought it was silly, like for instance, to consider yourself to be in one of the Hogwarts houses. And the author, she was kind of saying like, well, for a lot of people, we may not know who our people are, especially if we're really introverted and we don't get out there and we're shy and we don't come across the same opportunities that maybe more outgoing, outspoken people have. The way of bringing people together. So 1, you can find your people, but 2, you're not alone out there. We all have something that can connect us, and fandoms are one of them. Super fascinating read. I definitely recommend you pick it up if you are into Marvel, DC, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, anime, any of that, then you would have something to relate to in this book, and I would suggest you check it out. The next 3.5-star is Fina by Nino Cipri. I heard about this first on Kayla's channel, Books and Lala. It was recommended to her by somebody that she was watching. It's a short science fiction novella. There's talk of multiple universes and wormholes connecting those universes and having clones of yourself in other universes. It was very, very interesting. I do wish it had been a little bit longer. And the last 3.5-star read was Clown Brigade by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a horror novella. There's not much that I can say about this. It's very strange, very horrific at parts. I think if maybe you enjoyed The Joker, the one with Joaquin Phoenix, if you enjoyed that movie and that storyline, you know, learning more about the Joker and who he is and how he came to be what he is, this might be a good quick little read for you. There's not like a whole lot of similarities, but it did certainly make me think of the Joker. I had 2 4-star books this month. The first was Lessons. Oh, I have this one. I can start holding these up now. See, that was my problem when I started filming the other day. I got like half hour into it. I wasn't holding up any of my books. I'm like, I'm not gonna just put the pictures up here. Like, that's too much work. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. This one has had a lot of buzz lately. It's a historical fiction novel. It follows Elizabeth Zott, and she is a chemist in the 1950s. This, the summary says 1960s, but that's later in the book. I think majority of it actually does take place in the 50s. So if you can imagine strong women in the workforce with male coworkers, doesn't make for a great situation, but I really enjoyed this book. Did I really only rate it 4? I could have sworn I rated it 4.5, but 4 is fine. Maybe a reason that this wouldn't have been a 4.5 or 5-star was because it did take me a while to get into it. It is very literary, which I don't typically like, but the content of the book really is what did it for me, honestly. And ooh, I was so angry reading this book. The gender inequality in the workplace, the injustice of what happens in this book, I was livid. And I used to be somebody who romanticized this time period. That is not me at all, and I thank Elizabeth Zott for reminding me of that. Some things that I really liked about this was obviously the strong female main character, and you also get the point of view of her dog, which sounds really weird and maybe a little young, but it's not, I promise you. It works for this story. It really does. And then also, one thing that I kind of got out of this was if you're a fan of Julia Child, you might be interested in this as well, because there is a portion where she's on a cooking show, but she's very scientifically minded and she doesn't approach things as like food and prepping food and things like that. She approaches everything as this happens when you heat this food to this temperature and combine it with the chemical compounds of this food, and that's why it has this aroma. And like when she's raising her daughter, she's not just feeding her daughter to feed her, she's feeding her because she knows at a molecular level this particular food given to her daughter at this particular time in her development is going to be most beneficial for her brain development. It's fascinating. So if you like science, if you like historical fiction, if you like badass women, and if you like cooking and Julia Child, I definitely think you should pick this up. The other 4-star book that I read this month was Ready Player One. This is a science fiction dystopian novel about in a world, I want to say it's like 2045 or 2046, 2044. In the year 2044, the world is complete and utter crap. Everything has kind of fallen apart, but there's this virtual world called the Oasis. It's commonplace for students to go to school in the Oasis, or for people to go to work in the Oasis, even go on dates. It's mind-boggling, but at the same time, I found it incredibly fascinating. So anyways, the creator of the Oasis, he passes away, and in his will, he says, I've left a bunch of Easter eggs written in my code for anyone who enters the Oasis and can find these clues and follow them. There is a grand prize at the end. We're following Wade. He is a high school student. He ends up being the first one to find a first Easter egg. I loved how creative it was, and it was really, really well written. I did actually really like the characters in here because we get to know a few of the characters that are friends of Wade's, and I liked the ending a lot. Because I don't want anything to mess with that, I have the sequel. I'm probably not going to read it. If you like video games, if you like 80s vibes, because there are so many vibes from the 80s in here, and you like sci-fi, dystopian sci-fi specifically, definitely pick this one up. My 4.5-star read is Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun by Elle Casamano. This one was also an e-arc from NetGalley. This is the 3rd book in the Finley Donovan series. Not too much to complain about on that one. I honestly can't think of why I didn't rate it a 5, other than it just didn't have like the 5-star feel. All right, you guys, I had 3 5-star reads this month. 3. The first of which was Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. This is Tom Felton's memoir. I loved it. I listened to it on audio. I got it from Audible specifically to listen to it on audio because I'm like, if I can listen to Tom Felton read me this story, then I will. So that's what I did. I was not even a big like Draco Malfoy fan, but Tom Felton is just such a cool, down-to-earth guy. He's so humble. I have like a little crush on him now just because of how amazing he is. This book talks about his life into stardom. You know, he did commercials at one point and he did do a couple other movies. I think most of them I've not seen, but then he talked about The Borrowers and I'm like, oh my gosh, P. Green. I completely forgot that he was in that. He was such a little dude. And then of course, you know, when he got to the parts of filming for Harry Potter, that was really cool to listen to as well because that was my childhood, Harry Potter. It started in 3rd grade when I started reading the books. It's still going. Like that will always be a part of me, always. And to hear the way that he talks, like Tom is so respectful of his elder co-stars. Like he talked so much about Jason Isaacs, who played his dad, Lucius Malfoy. He talked about Alan Rickman, who played Severus Snape. He talked about Maggie Smith, who played Professor McGonagall. It just like really reiterated how amazing those people were. It's like to see it in the movies, to hear about it in the tabloids, but then to also hear it from somebody who got to work with them very, very closely. If you are a Tom Felton fan, if you are a fan of any of the many amazing, accomplished actors that devoted years and years and years of their lives to these movies, if you were one of those kids that grew up around Harry Potter and it is in your blood forever and always, then I suggest that you read this. The second 5-star read for January was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm pretty sure I'm maybe one of the last people to have read this book, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot about it. I'm sure everyone knows what it's about, and if they don't, they can very shortly start watching the series on, I think, Amazon Prime, I'm pretty sure. This was actually my second Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I did read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo way back in 2017 because that's when I joined Book of the Month. She knows how to write characters that you care about, even characters that I didn't really care about, but it's like I was invested. I loved it. And the final book, this one probably my favorite read of January, and that is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I think I've talked about this one a couple times in other videos, so again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's science fiction, there is time travel, and it was amazing. It blew me away. If you've read The Glass Hotel and Station 11, also by this author, I think you will get more out of this because there are parts and characters from those stories that are included in here, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't think you're gonna necessarily miss out on anything. It's amazing. This literally blew my mind. It's truly a work of art. I think that was all of them. Hopefully I'm not missing any. Oh, I did want to talk about the books that were on my January TBR. I read, let's see. I did start Ninth House. This was the buddy read I was doing with Keisha. I've temporarily put it down because of the X's and O's readathon. And plus I have a couple library books that I want to read before they have to go back. I am still reading this. I am enjoying it. So there's that one. One was on my January TBR. I have read it, but I finished it like February 1st or February 2nd. So it's not gonna be in this wrap up. It'll be in next month's wrap up. Still didn't get to this one. And I have a whole Emily Henry vlog that I'm just waiting to read this so I can get that wrapped up. Y'all, I've been working on that vlog since November, and there's a lot of Christmas stuff in there that I'm probably gonna end up cutting out because at this point it's just not relevant. And then the other two books that were on my January TBR, Lessons in Chemistry, which I did read, Sea of Tranquility, which I did read. I'm happy about that. So there were 6 books. Oh, Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun was also another book on my January TBR. I've read 4 of the 6. I've at least started reading 5 of the 6, and then there was only 1 that I didn't even touch. I'd say that's pretty good. I'm gonna cut myself a break, okay? And you should too. Cut yourself a break. We don't need to be so serious here. Thank you so much everyone for joining me to talk about all the books that I read in January. I hope that everyone had a lovely January. I don't know about you, but January is like the longest, darkest, coldest month of the year for me. So I can't imagine I'm the only one that feels that way. I hope you're doing well. I hope you made it through. I hope you had some amazing reads. Let me know what was your favorite book that you read in January, or just your favorite book that you're reading right now. I want to hear like all the 5-star reviews. If you've read a book that was 5 stars, tell me about about it, because if I haven't read it, I want to. Thank you again so much, and until next time, bye.